Will, I'm an alcoholic. Excuse me. I have long looked forward to attending this group, and it's a special pleasure on my first time to hear someone who, as a person and as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I so admire. I have been his sponsor 18 or 19 years. It's a big part of my program. I only hope it's has been as good for him. And I'm really looking forward to his story. So, Chris F.
My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. I was kind of nervous about having Will do that because he always says all this nice stuff about me, and I was like, don't make me live up to a whole bunch of great stuff. So thank God he didn't go on and on about all that. Anyway, okay, so first, I hate this. You know, by the end of it, I'll be okay, but, you know, it's all right. But it's hard. So I was born in Missouri, in Joplin, Missouri. I had 3 older brothers and a younger sister, and my parents were, so my dad was the kind of person who would wax his car every week, you know, and arrange all the cans on the shelves in the kitchen to face the front, you know, in order of height and stuff like that. And my mom was the kind of person who'd leave the electric can opener plugged in on the edge of the bathtub. Just like by nature. And then aside from that, she was an alcoholic addict. And, you know, it was just crazy. I always hesitate, you know, I think about, should I, you know, tell all that stuff about childhood or not, you know? And so I just kind of go with whatever comes out. And, you know, it made me who I am. So, and it gave me some tools, and it also gave me lessons and things I've had to learn in sobriety that, because I didn't learn them as a kid. So anyway, they were a little nutty. My dad, I don't think he was such a bad guy, but for whatever reason, my dad, he just didn't like me, you know, he just didn't seem like he liked me. I had these 3 older brothers that were good at sports and handsome and popular, and, you know, I fucking hated them. And they were, you know, tough and strong and masculine, and I just felt completely different. And I felt like, I think looking back, probably my parents didn't think of me as that bad, but for part of my own, you know, shame or whatever, I got that idea. And then, of course, my sister just had to be, like, tall and gorgeous, blonde and beautiful. So it was like she was the pretty one, they were the smart, tough ones, and I was just kind of, you know, I don't even know what I was. But I wasn't particularly feminine, I don't think, not as much as I am now. I was, I mean, now I feel like a pregnant 8th grader in a man's body. But anyway, I just felt like an outsider. I just felt so different and not enough and wrong and broken and everything. And some of that I can blame on my parents' parenting skills. I'm sorry to laugh, but parenting skills and my parents, you know, if you knew them. But they discovered they hated each other shortly after they got married, and so they got a divorce 25 years later. And my mom was very beautiful, but here's the thing. Okay, so mine always become kind of an Al-Anon / therapy session, so sorry, you know. So, because, you know, this program at first was about not drinking, and then it became about changing how I did everything and trying to find out why, so I could figure, you know, change the way I did things and become a different person, really. Let's see. So my mom was very beautiful when she was young, but she kind of rebelled against it, if that makes any sense. She, right after they got married, she cut her hair short and wouldn't wear makeup, and she just kind of, I feel like my mom felt ugly on the inside and she wanted to be unattractive on the outside. And it was all about self-esteem and stuff. And the reason that's important is because that was part of what was kind of passed on to me, the way I felt about myself. And I think with my brothers and my sister too. My sister kind of has some of that disease or whatever it is. So mom would routinely get drunk and do crazy things, and they'd have these fights, and generally I didn't see much, but I would hear things and you knew what was going on, but sometimes it really devolved into craziness. One time Dad brought us, we called them the boys and the little ones, if that gives you a hint how they thought of us. I mean, I wasn't one of the boys. Anyway, I did have a penis, but anyway, so my dad brought us to church one day. We get home, and I'm pretty little, pretty young, but I just have vague memories of getting home, and my mom was drunk, and my dad's mad at her, and so she goes and gets a butcher knife and comes after him, and then he's trying to take it away from her, and then she runs out in the backyard and gets in the playhouse with the butcher knife, and he has to go get Grandma, and Grandma comes and gets us, takes us to her house, and that was the kind of thing that would happen sometimes. And then the rest of the time, we were the cute blue-eyed blonde family down the street with the nice house. Like, the yard was mowed perfectly, the bushes were exactly the way they're supposed to be. It was my dad's, straightening the cans, everything looked perfect. But the inside was kind of a trailer park. And when my dad, it took me a long time to drink. I feel like, to me, it started with sugar. I would go out in the kitchen at night and eat spoonfuls of sugar. And literally just a teaspoon and just take these bites of sugar, stuff like that. I'd make up these desserts. I'm like 9 or 10 years old doing all this stuff, white trash desserts. I still make them today, but I wouldn't really share them with anybody. But so my dad finally left at some point. He met someone else and left, and they'd been married 24 years. I was, 12 or 13 or something. And my mom really went crazy after that. My brothers were just old enough to be, one was at college and the other two had jobs and had moved out. Because in my house, you kind of moved out as soon as you could. So they were all 17 when they moved out of the house. And he kind of left us there with me taking care of my mom and my little sister. And it was crazy. I got to see what a bottoming out alcoholic does and how they are at the very, bottom of their craziness. And she would take off and go to a mental hospital. And I'd get home from school, and of course she was a little bit of a hoarder. And, I don't want to paint a picture of my mom being this horrible person, because honestly, she really never meant to hurt anyone. She really, deep down, is the kindest, sweetest, most generous person. But her alcoholism and mental disease, whatever she had, Charles Mansonism or whatever, she just wasn't able to be that person a lot, and she really didn't show up much. And she would go to a mental hospital, and my sister and I would be there by ourselves in the house for, I don't even really know how long, a couple of weeks or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, 14 or something. My sister's 10. It was craziness. And so I made the decision that I would never drink alcohol, and I would never become what she was. And I would never go that direction. I would never do all that crazy stuff. She took a lot of prescription pills and stuff. And I was very clear on that one thing, that I was never going to drink. I was never going to do that stuff. And it really did go, I'm not going to get all into it, but it was insanity. She would slash her wrists sometimes because she'd try to kill herself. And, never mind that there's these two kids here that, kind of didn't really know what to do with that. But that's what it was. And I went through a lot of years of being really depressed and angry about it all. And, it's unfair. And, God treated me so badly, giving me this family. And I've gone through tons of that stuff, and blaming God for all my problems, and blaming my mother, and blame, and all this stuff. And it looks so different to me now after 24 years of sobriety. I have to say this real quick before I move on into my drinking. My mom, she was sober many years before she died, and she was still kind of nutty. I mean, whatever. But she was not a bad person, and she was sober. We had a lot of conversations. And one time She couldn't remember a lot of this. Some of it's blackout, but some of it was she'd had shock treatment and stuff in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. So she really doesn't remember big chunks, years of our lives. And so I told her, so I told her. I mean, of course I did. Okay, you don't remember? Here's what you did. And so when you're telling the story, you can tell it how you want. No, I'm just kidding. I would tell her kind of, what happened and stuff. And she wanted to know. And at one time she said, this is well into sobriety for me and well into sobriety for her. And we're not like best friends or anything, but we're on really good terms at this point. And she said, I just need to say I'm so sorry that things went the way they did. And I'm so sorry that I was not a good mom to you kids. And it was a real neat moment. But I said, I'm not sorry. And this just came out. I don't really know exactly why it came out, but real quick, a little backup thing. I always wanted a whole bunch of Crayolas. My friends always had the 64 box of Crayolas with the sharpener, and I would get 8 because she was something of an artist and she wanted me to learn how to mix colors and shit. So you mix red with white to make pink for skin, right? Well, when you're in Missouri, you do. That's the skin color in Missouri. And so you mix red and white to make pink, and so they turn out blotchy, like they have an illness or something. Like, it doesn't work to make colors when you do it with Crayolas. But anyway, that was a big complaint. That was the kind of thing I felt like so unfair. So she says that she's sorry and all this, and I said, I'm not sorry. I said, all these experiences, they're not bad. They're just experiences. It's just life. And it's just the way it turned out. And I feel like it's made me who I am. And I feel like I have, that briefcase of 128 colors, the one that you open and it folds out like that inside me, to paint with. I don't have 8 Crayolas. I have all those colors. Other people don't even have these colors. And I really believe it. That's the way I look at it now. It was crazy, but after these years of sobriety, it all looks very different, and it doesn't feel like you had a worse or better childhood. It just feels like different, and we learned what we learned. Anyway, so I wasn't gonna drink, so I'm like 18. Oh, Patrick placed a clock right here, just in case you miss it. Probably has an alarm. So I'm out of high school and kind of trying to go to college, but I was so, I just had so many things in my head, and I was so depressed, and I couldn't figure out what to make of the world. They had not had us. We didn't take baths every day or showers. Nobody really told us. So I wet the bed every night until I was in the 9th grade, and probably just weird, kids that are treated a certain way do strange things, and we didn't take showers or baths every day. We took them once a week. So I went to school that way, and if you can just imagine, kids would call me stinky, and I really didn't know why. I was like, I didn't know I stunk. I just thought they were being mean, and it turns out I stunk. So a neighbor told me to wear deodorant and take a shower every day and all this kind of stuff, because she kind of sensed there was a little bit of crazy over in the Foley household. And so I'm like 17 or 18, and my friends are always talking about alcohol and drinking and what it's like and how much fun they had, and I just felt like I was missing it. And I thought, well, maybe I just need to see what it's like. I mean, I'm not going to get drunk or anything. I just want to know what it's like to what it is they're talking about. And so I just kind of innocently drank whatever they handed me that night. It was New Year's Eve, and we went to this bar, underage. It was 21 in Missouri, and I'm trying to go to school at the time and everything. It's a break in the winter, and we're at this bar, and I just drink whatever they gave me. And I noticed after like the first drink or so, it was like, oh my God, I don't really feel like scared of these people. I don't feel like a dumbass. I don't feel like I don't know how to live. I feel like I kind of got the rule book all of a sudden. Like, it was so literally that different when I drank something. I don't know what it's like for you guys, but it was like I went from this terrified person who had no idea, I just needed to watch everybody and learn. Okay. Oh, take a bath every day. Okay. Oh, this is how you clean up. This is how you live. This is how you pay bills. I was watching people and learning this stuff. And so when I drank that alcohol, I was like, oh my God, I feel like, I'm just a person, a normal person in the world. And I felt like I could just walk over and talk to people. I was like magical beyond belief. And so I got so drunk, and I was specifically remember standing there and going, and my friend Jeff had driven me, and that was part of the plan. He said, well, if you're going to drink tonight, I'll just drive. That way, if you do drink too much, you won't have to drive home. I can drive you home. So so I get pretty wasted, and I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, it's kind of weird, but I feel like the world is like coming like this, like I can't see very well, and it was getting all blurry. And I'm, doing this, trying to see and stuff. I felt okay, and I remember standing there, like kind of leaning on this post thing, and I see this blue and red kind of, and I grab, and I go, Jeff, is that you? And he said, yeah. He goes, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay, but I think we should leave. And so we go out, and he goes, well, there's this after party. Do you want to go to it? And I said, I guess. And so we get in the car, and I said, we're driving. I said, well, what happens when you get sick? He goes, are you going to get sick? I said, no. I just want to know, do you just feel like you're going to throw up, or what? Is it the flu? What is it like? And he said, well, you'll just feel like you're getting sick, and you'll tell me, and I'll pull over, and you can, jump out real quick. And I said, okay, pull over. So he pulls over. Oh my God, it was like my childhood came out. I mean, it was like, oh, guys, I don't need to tell you. So, and I'm like done, and I'm like, oh my God, wiping my shirt. And I get in the car and sit down, and I go, God, I feel so much better. God, I can't believe it feels that much better after just throwing up. He says, okay, I'll take you home. I go, no, let's go to the party. So we go to the party, and I started the whole process again. So that was just because that was my first time drinking. I just wanted to describe that because, people used to say in sobriety, they say, don't you ever want to drink? And I'm like, a drink? No, I've never really wanted a drink. I only want to be obliterated. Like, to me, the whole idea is to be gone, and have the world close in like this and not be able to see or hear. And it's just, I'm alone. That's what I wanted. And I mean, the other thing I wanted was that feeling of being enough, but that would disappear quick. And then it was like, I just wanted to be obliterated. And even now when I think about it, if I think about, what would I do if I was going to drink something? And I still kind of have, not a craving, but still kind of have a desire to be wasted. I don't really have a desire to have a cocktail or, sit out and have a beer after mowing the yard. That's just lame to me. I don't understand that. But so the next thing you know, I'm driving drunk all the time. I already had moved out, by the way. I didn't say that. I had moved out when I was just barely 18. I got a job that paid pretty good for that age, and I was going to school about half of the time and not showing up for classes. I was just the worst student you can even imagine. I didn't do anything I was supposed to do, and I was flunking out my freshman year, and I would walk past the people standing around on the steps to the whatever hall it was, and they were the ones that, like, in the fraternities and stuff, and I had just found out what hours meant. Like, you take 3-hour classes. I thought it was a 3-hour class. I didn't know that they counted hours. Anyway, I'm still not even sure how it works. But so it took me about 2.5 years to become, I think I did finish my freshman year, and in 2.5 years. And the bars were open. So, I just went as much as I could. I had that job where I worked the second shift. I made pretty good money. I paid for my apartment and my car payment. And I would drive home, like sometimes I'd drive back to my apartment, and I'd be trying to see, and it was so hard to see, and I'd go like this because it was like, why is everything, and I'm looking and I'm kind of seeing like that, or else I would open the door and look at the line in the middle and drive along that line because it was just hard to see, and it's bizarre now when I think about that seems so normal. I did it all the time. I thought everybody did, and I certainly knew every gay person did that. That's what gay people did. We went to bars and got drunk. On and on and on. So I ended up moving to Dallas, and then I got a job as a flight attendant for whatever, big airline. they based me in, there's a bug flying around me. Do I still smell that? Worked for this big airline, and they based me in Chicago. So I went to Chicago, and luckily I didn't have a car there. I lived downtown in this little dinky apartment, and I lived there for a couple of years, and I decided I really needed to have a bed at one point, because I was, at first I moved in there, I'm just sleeping on a mattress on the floor, one of those air mattresses, that you take to the pool. And and it got to where it would leak. So at night I would sleep until I felt like the floorboards, and then I would get up and then go back to sleep on the soft air mattress. And finally, it took me probably, I lived there over a year before I just couldn't scrape the money together for a mattress or box springs or anything. It was all bars and enough to eat and just to get to work. And so I'm working trips in wrinkled shirts that I would get up off the floor, and I would boil water on the stove and take the pan and kind of iron the shirt out a little bit, but it wasn't even washed. I can't believe I stayed, and my supervisor was saying, in order to keep this job, you have to come to work, because I'd call in sick, because I was hungover, I wanted to go to a party. She thought I had AIDS. In those days it was kind of new. It was 1985, so it was, anytime you knew a homosexual that had a cold, it was AIDS. That's kind of how people looked at it. And so I think that she thought that, so she kind of let me get away with a lot, because I was always sick, right? And I let her think that. And many, many years later, I saw her on a flight, 20 years later, and I was able to tell her the truth just because I felt like I needed to. But anyway, I knew what to do. She was saying I was going to lose my job, and I knew I couldn't do anything else. I didn't have anywhere to go. There was no parent that was going to help me. I was going to be homeless in Chicago if I lost my job, and so I knew that I needed to change something. So I moved back to Dallas, and I had a generous benefactor kind of help me out, so that I had an apartment for a while with a friend of mine, and. Let's see, it just goes on and on. I started thinking I needed to quit drinking because when I look back, I realized, we just called it AIDS then, it wasn't HIV. Originally it was like ARC or RID or something, and we had different names for it as they figured out what it was, and they didn't know it was a virus at first. There was all kinds of things. You didn't know if people got it in restaurants. You didn't know if you got it from your hairdresser. Excuse me, and I started thinking that I probably had it, and in '85 was when my ex-boyfriend and another ex-boyfriend, I had a lot of ex-boyfriends. Anyway, no current boyfriends, a lot of ex-boyfriends, but the two in a row died. And when people died then, it was like, Randy has pneumonia, and he's in the hospital. And then within a month or two, sometimes a month, sometimes, I don't even know how long, but a short time, you'd hear that they died, and they died of all these illnesses, these horrible sicknesses. There was no medicine, there wasn't anything they could really do. They still were just figuring out that it was what it was, how you got it. And so I started thinking, I'm gonna have to stop drinking and running around, because I need to start taking care of myself. And I just couldn't. I just would say daily, practically, I'm not going to do that tonight, and I would just go. It was almost like somebody else was moving my body, and I would end up at the bar. I was always a bar drinker, and so now I'm back in Dallas. That's going on. It's I got one more thing, that the mattress thing. I meant to finish that. One day, a year or two into living in an apartment on parquet floors with an air mattress, or just sleeping on the hard floor on a blanket. I hadn't scraped together the money for a mattress or a chair or anything. I got a chair out of a dumpster once. I had a chair. It was bent. And then I was coming home one night at 2 a.m. and staggering in there, and there was a mattress and box springs leaning against the dumpster because somebody moved. And I'm like, that looks better than what I'm sleeping on now. So I drag it upstairs, and one night I noticed that there were some roaches in my place. So I got Raid. I got 2 cans of Raid. It's like 3 a.m. I'm spraying Raid all around the corners and everything. And then, because I still kind of had a neatness fetish in a weird way, So I spray the red and go to sleep on my mattress, pass out, whatever. And in the nighttime, I heard this strange sound. I told you I had that parquet floors. This clicking sound and I thought, what is that? And for all I knew, roaches made a sound when Raid killed them. Maybe they go, make this little clicking sound. I don't know. I mean, rabbits have a wail, right? So I'm like, what is that? And I get up, I turn on the light, and they were like crawling up the walls, across the ceiling, and falling. And they make that click sound when they hit the floor. And it was not pretty. So, I had to keep the lights on bright so they wouldn't climb up the wall. That's how I went back to sleep. I didn't really go back to sleep. I had a trip, I think, the next day and had to get up early and go on this trip, with my wrinkled shirt and my, stewardess uniform. I can't even imagine. And keeping that job with the threat of AIDS keeping me from losing it because I could say, you fired me because I have HIV, AIDS or whatever. It was just all this crazy thing. So at some point then, my roommate talked me into going to AA, and I went to Lambda, and I just used to sit here and think, what are you talking about? Like, I need to know how to not go to the bar tonight. And you guys were talking about, steps. I'm like, what the fuck, And I'd say that in meetings sometimes. I said this today or yesterday. I would just go, I need to know how to not go to the bar tonight, you guys. And you're talking about amends? Who cares? And they would just laugh, and tell me stuff that I can't remember and didn't remember then. And I would go away, go to JR's, come back the next day. And anyway, this went on. And I ended up going to a treatment center, and it took pretty well. I realized I at least needed therapy, but it was all still my mom's fault. Everything was still the fault of my parents. And so I kept doing, I stayed sober, I want to say for 3 years. I had a sobriety boyfriend that I had met, in our first few months. And girl, he was a mess. You think I was a mess? I hope he's not here. Anyway, I don't think he's still in prison, but anyway, that was a nightmare. But at some point, I went back out and tried it again, and it really quickly went back to the same thing. And only this time, I knew that my mom had gotten sober, and I knew that I had been sober before, and at least I got it. At least I knew there is a different way to live. And I had learned a lot about life and how to live and everything at that point, but the first thing I noticed back that time, because the first time it's almost like I don't remember being sober. I don't really remember learning much. I just kind of went to meetings and hung out with people and just suddenly wasn't going to the bars. It was kind of magic. But that's all I knew about it. And as my life kind of got more normal and I was no more threat of losing my job, I just was like, well, I don't really need, AA anymore. I just kind of needed therapy. So that's why I went out. It felt like it was kind of unnecessary. So, but it took a little while. I did just start with like a drink at a time, and then like second night, 2 drinks, and then a couple nights later, what would it be like if I got drunk once, And then the next thing it was just on. And I still felt like if I could go a day without alcohol, that meant I could not drink, right? Because I would not drink for a day. So after a day, I'd go, see, I can not drink anytime I want. And so I got to have all I wanted that night. And that's just the way I saw it. And so, whatever, I ended up back in AA. And Gary G was my sponsor. And I walked in there that first night. It was on the night of the Halloween celebration down in the Crossroads. They used to block off the streets then and have this parade of all these amazing costumes and stuff. And I remember driving down to try to find a parking space because I lived a little ways away. And I remember thinking, now I could go look for a parking space and start this evening. And I had this feeling of like hopelessness, like, here I go again. It's like I'm doing this again. And I know I don't even want to do it. And it's like the car's driving itself. I was like, what? How do you stop this merry-go-round? And just pause for a minute and get off. I wanted something to be different. And I remember thinking I could either turn right and go down Cedar Springs and then go down the side street, or I could go down to 2727 Oak Lawn to where I knew that Lambda was. And it was like, really just sitting there for a minute at that light going, and I decided to go the way down to Lambda. And I walked in and there's that James K. who's here. And I don't think Will was here that night, but he was? You don't remember that. Girl, one of the first things James told me in our friendship was, your pants don't have to be that tight. And I was like, what? I mean, how am I going to find a husband? I mean, I just thought that's what you do. I mean, that's what you do in Missouri. So I have to say, you talk about a friend. I have friends now. I have dear friends now, too, of course, that I've had over the years, which some of them are here. And but James was so amazing. I mean, he would let me just spew and talk forever and never said a word, just let me talk. And he would say some little gentle thing like, well, maybe you could do things differently, or maybe go talk to your sponsor, whatever. And he was just the best friend anybody could ever hope for. Never forget that time getting sober. And this time I sort of listened to my sponsor, but it was a constant argument. I would say, well, I've got to get more hours at work. I have to have more money because I can't pay my bills. My sponsor would say, well, I want you to do the second step. I want you to write this about your second step. And I'd go, I need that thing that, that green stuff to pay bills. The steps aren't going to pay my rent, okay? And Gary would go, oh, honey. He'd say, you need to work your steps or whatever. And I would just argue with him, and I'd say stuff like, because I didn't come from a gentle past. I would say stuff like, I didn't have a mom who died and left me some money, so I have to work. I can't do steps and meetings. I don't even know why he kept me on. It's like unbelievable. Because I'd get so mad and I just couldn't. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Are you an idiot? Because of course his life was better. He had everything and he didn't have this childhood I had, and he wasn't dumb like me, because I felt like I was dumb. School was so terrible, and obviously I'm stupid. Obviously God made me dumb too, right? So that's kind of how I felt, and obviously unattractive and skinny and have knobby knees and small eyes, and I had all this picture of what I was, and I couldn't see it any other way. But one of the things that happened early on was Gary said, let's go to lunch tomorrow, we'll meet whatever, and I decided not to go, so I just didn't go. And he calls me, he's mad, and I said, well, I had something come up, and he's like, you don't do that. I went down there and sat and waited for you, and you need to show up when you say you're going to. And it's honestly the first time it really occurred to me, you mean it matters if I'm there? Like I was like, what? And it was this really cool lesson about, it wasn't about doing the wrong thing, it was about realizing it mattered, that I mattered. It was like an inkling of self-esteem that I hadn't had before. And 100 things like that have happened in the program. I'm going to just kind of skip around to stuff that just occurs to me I want to tell you about, because I've had all these amazing things. As I was going through the steps with Gary and then with another sponsor, it was what came up with my amends. I couldn't really think of hardly any. I did have to pay some money back to my employer that I had kind of swiped. You could just kind of say you comped drinks to passengers and not say they bought them, and then just kind of pocket the money. And so I just did that a lot. So I had to pay money back to my company, and I did. I paid it back. And that was the agreement we had. I didn't have to tell them what was going on. I just had to pay it and put it back in the same way I took it out, just kind of acting like it belonged there. And so I did that, and he was like, this one sponsor was like, I want you to write a letter to your mom thanking her for the good things she did, because, he knew I was, a nice looking person with a life. So obviously she did some things right? And my dad must have done some things right. And my argument was, they didn't do this. I figured this out on my own. I figured out how to take a fucking shower every day. I forgot we're on TV too, aren't we, or something? So I figured out how to do this. I don't blame my parents. You can't give them the credit. And Anyway, around and around we went about this amend. I'm like, how's that an amend to tell my mom good things about herself that she didn't even really do? And he was like, you have to repair your primary caregiver's relationship. You have to repair those somehow. You can't really just move on without taking care of these things. You can't just go forward with a lot of this stuff in your head. And I was like, whatever. And he taught me that an amend is not I'm sorry. An amend is to repair. So how do you repair a relationship? So my mom had ended up kicking us out when I was 16. My sister was 12. She said she got a boyfriend in AA. She was a newcomer. She got a boyfriend. He didn't like us. And she said, you guys are going to have to go. So your dad sent the money for a ticket so you can go back to Missouri. That's how we ended up in Missouri. Only I said, I'm not going back to live with him. He's the enemy. And she said, well, you're not staying here. So I called my uncle and who had helped move us down there while she was in the hospital. And he said, yeah, you can stay with me. And I'd finished my senior year of high school there with living with him. And I forgot why I was telling you that. I got lost. Where was I a second ago? Who knows? Wait, I'm sober. What's the last thing you remember I talked about, being sober? You guys aren't paying attention. Oh yeah, the amends. So my mom and the whole thing, I was like, what do you thank your mother for when she was like that? And he said, well, an amend is to repair. And I'm like, how do you repair this? And he said, well, you start being a good son. And I'm like, it's just not right. It doesn't seem fair. I have to be a good son. And the lesson was, can you be a better son than she was a mother? And he says, well, just write the letter, just write it. And I'm like, I can't think of anything that she did. So finally one day I sit down, and a bunch of you have heard this story. I'm sorry to bore you with it, but it's just a huge chunk of my sobriety. He said, I sit down and I'm like so annoyed. And I have this piece of paper and a pen, and I think, okay, dear mom. And I wrote it hard into the paper so it kind of tore the paper. And I went, and God, it always gets me. I remembered that she taught me how to write dear and the person's name and a comma. And she said, and then you indent. It's called indenting. And you start the paragraph. Thank you for the present you sent me, blah, blah, blah. Because there were times when my mom had her crap together. She had gone to finishing school. She was this beauty in Lexington, Massachusetts. And she'd done all these things. And then she ended up married to this guy and an alcoholic and couldn't find her way. And she never felt like she was that beauty. That was like a mistake. So her life went crazy and she did all this stuff. But during that time, there were moments of clarity and days or weeks or even where she was kind of herself and taught me a lot of things. And I could actually read before I went to kindergarten. When I went to kindergarten, they said, he can read and stuff and play the piano, and put him in first grade. So I went to first grade when I was 5, and she taught me all that. So I write, dear mom, and I'm like, flashback. I remember she told me how to write that, and she did this for me. And I started remembering things, and I went, okay, go with it. So I put, I remember when you told me how to write a letter and how to indent and how to make a paragraph. And consequently, every time I write the word dear, I think of you. And, excuse me, and I started losing it like I am now. And things started hitting me, little things that she did that were, sometimes she would put down the glass, brace herself, and help me do something. Or she would show up in some way. And it didn't seem like anything, but when I wrote that letter, it ended up being a really beautiful letter about the things that she did that were good. And imagine what it was like for a 60-year-old lady whose grown kids don't talk to her to get this letter that described in detail the things that she did that were good for her kids. In her sobriety, can you imagine what that must have meant? And so it changed her life, and it changed mine. After that, the flashcards in my head, I feel like I have flashcards. I used to look at my childhood. It was blood and things and horrible things and no baths and people, not liking me because I didn't smell good and terrible grades in school. And this was my flashcards I saw in my childhood. And then after I wrote that letter, I would think of my childhood and my mom, and I had new flashcards. It was the most amazing thing. It was like a gratitude list, and I learned what a gratitude list really is. It changes your focus. If I'm thinking about the things I don't have, I have a certain feeling about life and about everything. But when I change those flashcards and start focusing on the good things, it changes everything. And somewhere along the line, so that helped our relationship. We never had the perfect one, but it was a lot better. And I learned that loving someone is a verb. It's an action. I could say I love my mother and not really have the feeling. I didn't really ever have that feeling. But I can say I loved my mother with my actions. I loved her. I did loving things. I didn't do all of them, and I didn't do them perfectly, but I did a lot of loving things for my mother. And the gift was for me. I'm the one that got the gift out of it. When you learn how to love somebody who's essentially unlovable, it's a gift itself. And so later in sobriety, still working on the steps, amends, things like that. I'm going along, and I have this partner that's treating me badly. He's doing things that, are not really acceptable, and I was accepting them. And again, James K. helped me for months, if not years, with that whole deal. It was just a mess. And the reason I bring it up is not really about the guy. It's about the fact that, and he wasn't that cute. So I was sitting there one day talking to James, and I said, I feel like maybe I'm going to have to ask him to move out, because I had bought this house with my down payment, my credit, and he paid rent, but it was my house, and because he didn't have credit or money or whatever. So I said, I think I'm going to have to ask him to move out. And it was devastating, because all I ever wanted was a family. All I ever wanted was, this thing. And I felt like I'd had it until I didn't really have it, until it didn't go very well. But it was going to be hard, and I knew it was going to be hard to say, you got to go. But hung up from the phone from James, and I picked up the phone again, and I dialed the number. And I knew from AA, you pick up the phone, pick it up. You don't have to make the call yet, just pick up the phone. Okay, now dial. You don't have to talk yet, just dial. Okay, when they answer, okay, start talking. Like the letter. You don't have to write the letter before you get the paper out. You get the paper out, then you get the pen, and then you start with Dear Mom. You don't have to do it before you do it. Just get started and take the next step. So I just picked up the phone, and I remember specifically thinking, just pick up the phone. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, I dial, and he, it wasn't one of those dials. And I pushed the buttons, and he answered. He's like, what's up? And I said, you're going to have to move out. What? You got to move out. You can't live here and do this stuff. When am I supposed to move out? By the end of the week. And so hung up the phone, and fully expecting to lose it and feel horrible. I've lost this family, this alleged family that I'd tried to create, and all this. And but what I felt was self-esteem. I felt more self-esteem. I felt like I had done something to take care of me that was hard. And I learned from that that's how you get self-esteem. I had prayed for self-esteem for years, if not decades. I'd prayed for God to tell me how to live and tell me how to be, and try to, wave his wand and make me into a pulled together person. I didn't know how to be a pulled together person. And I made that phone call, and I realized that when they said do esteemable things if you want self-esteem, do the thing that the person with self-esteem would do. You don't have to do what you want or what you feel or necessarily the right thing. Do what you think a person with self-esteem would do, and do that thing. That's how you get self-esteem. It's like a muscle that you exercise. It's not something that's granted to me. It's not given to me by God waving his wand, by magic Jesus. It's just something that you do. Like you love somebody. You are loving to them, and it creates love. We can create love. I think that we create self-esteem by doing things that are good for us and the right thing. So I learned that then, and I've learned all these things. I feel like Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me how to live in so many ways. I can't even tell you. It's been there's I can think of 100 more right now that I'd love to tell you, but it's probably time. Do I need to stop at like 50 or what time? 5 more minutes? Oh Lord. Okay, you guys. So okay, a couple more minutes. I've learned all these things, the amends thing, the self-esteem thing, the love thing is enormous. I feel like if I'm ever with somebody, for a long period of time, and I've already done it with friends, when I don't feel love for somebody, that doesn't mean I can't love them. You continue to do the actions when you don't feel it, because that's what a person with self-esteem and a life does. So I try to do this stuff. I'm not perfect at it, but I try to do this stuff even when I don't feel it. And it comes back around. It creates more of itself as you do it. Self-esteem works that way, love works that way, and I feel like money works that way. I don't think so much about how much money I have and what I'm going to do with it as, pick up the phone, try to get the job, go and ask the person, or go and talk to, or go sell the thing. You just start doing the actions. And the last thing I want to close with is this. I have never been able to pull my life into order and get things going right. I've never been able to change my character defects. I've never been able to stop doing anything. But I've always been able to do this one thing that does all of those, and that's turn my attention to my spiritual program. I can make that choice and do the next right step in the program, and the other stuff lines up. And I realize now, back in those days, that's what Gary G was trying to tell me. You can't make enough money to fix everything. You can't do enough hours. You can't clean up enough messes to fix stuff. You can't run the world. You can't run your life when you're an alcoholic. And I can't run my life. I can't fix everything. I can't do it all right. But I can do the next right step in the program. And what happens to me is a wonderful life is what happens to me while I'm working the steps. And I don't know if it sounds lame to people. I mean, maybe y'all need to go and work harder, get more hours, whatever. But for me, it's never worked that way. It's only been work harder on my steps and on what I'm supposed to do in my spiritual program, and the other stuff starts to line up. And if I had 20 more minutes, I'd tell you some of the amazing things that have happened and amazing gifts I've had. And my life is really I can't really imagine anybody. I mean, I'm so blessed and lucky and fortunate to have my life. And I was supposed to be dead from AIDS in the 80s. And they even said I might live past 1990, if I'm lucky. And well, I did live past 1990, and I lived to see a lot of amazing changes. And I like myself today, and that little kid who learned to hate himself and think he was a piece of shit and didn't deserve anything is gone. I mean, maybe he's still there somewhere inside me, but I take a lot better care of him today. And I appreciate you listening, and thank you.